Okay. Uh, so there is a new requirement that has gone into effect for Shenzhen regarding criminal background checks. And again, this just relates to Shenzhen. This one, as far as I know, as far as I'm aware, it does not relate to, for example, if you go a couple hours northwest of here, no, not a couple hours, an hour northwest of here. If you go to Dongguan, um, you won't have that requirement, apparently. Um, Now, it had always been that way before. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since Beijing. In the Beijing centrally governed. Well, essentially, Beijing is a municipality which comes under the direct leadership or the direct governments of the direct jurisdiction of the central government. And there are a couple of cities like that. For example, Shanghai, Beijing, Chongqing, uh, etc. Beijing is that has been the case in Beijing for quite some time. So the fact that now it has changed for Shenzhen, it and just Shenzhen doesn't surprise me. That is to say, it doesn't. The idea that now another limited locality, another specific location would go and try that um, policy themselves. It means that that the experiment up in Beijing with having people do these background checks to get a work visa, again, to get the work visa, um, it worked out or it wasn't that difficult, etc. Now, essentially, as I understand it, what's going to happen is the consulates are going to take over the take over the responsibility for ensuring that indeed this person, John Doe or Jane Doe, in fact doesn't have a criminal record in their home country. And I assume, I'm not sure, but they would probably use local databases. There's privately available paid background check type things, right? And these are not, and so I assume they do that because otherwise they'd have to go and check every single jurisdiction. A county in, Timbuktu, Colorado. They if some guy got in a bar fight or something, they would have to go and search the records there. I mean, that's the way it is. There is no um, there is an FBI records check. I know because I worked dealing with immigration applications for foreigners coming to the United States, including Chinese coming to the United States, long ago, long ago. They had an FBI database where they could pay to use that, but that was no, no, excuse me. It wasn't the government paying to use it because it was it was the United States federal government using their own data. Okay, and they don't just give that away for free. They don't just let anybody get access to that. Normally, what people have to do if you want to really ensure that another person has no criminal record, and I'm not talking about felonies, okay, I don't even think you can get a passport. And I think getting a passport is not that easy with a felony. I have no idea. But at any rate, um, I assumed originally that that was the main check. Essentially, that, because there's so originally it's so difficult for felons to get a passport, and there's problems with that sometimes. That was the check they were using, and it is a check to some degree. It really is, but for out in the world there, for you can't really ensure that someone doesn't have a criminal background check unless you go check with district courts and county courts all over the United States. Okay, you really can't know for sure, because a county in California isn't talking and sharing data directly with some municipal court in Georgia. I mean, they're separate jurisdictions. They maintain their own data. A cop pulls someone over in Georgia, and then they go deal with that person there, and they have their data there. It's and their records there, and it's not related to some district court in Northern California, right? So you could get a document from your local jurisdiction wherever you're living. Let's say you're a guy from Sacramento. You could get it from your city court or something like that. You could get a printout relating to your name, but it isn't a notarization. It's not a verification that somewhere else you haven't committed a misdemeanor, right? There isn't any one agency that does that, okay? So there's no notary for that, okay? And so, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic, but some people don't quite grasp that. They don't get that. And certainly Chinese policy making is borderline insane. I mean, really, it's a real joke on just so many levels. I mean, I don't need to go into that. So it wouldn't surprise me that they would create ridiculous requirements that reflected a massive ignorance of how our system works, right? Or what data is really available, or what we can do, because we can't do the same kind of things that they can do. Here, for example, you can go to a Chinese notary, and that notary, you could take to them a birth certificate, and that birth certificate would say, they will go out and try to determine whether or not, yes, indeed, what is in this document is true, that this person was born at that time. Okay, they're performing some sort of, I see you call them fact-finding functions, right? In the United States, as many of you will know right off the bat, and if you don't know, you'll know now, our notaries don't do that, right? So at any rate, I assume it's the consulate. You know, these consulates in China, they will kind of make some sort of preliminary check themselves, or when I say preliminary, I just mean they'll make their own decision about, well, okay, does this person have a criminal background or not? Is it okay? Is he or she cleared or not? And if you got in some shoving match with your girlfriend, and she called the cops, and you were charged with a misdemeanor, and you pled guilty, or you pled like a deferred prosecution or whatever that is, and now deferred prosecution, you used to get a person deported. I mean, you could get subject a person, an alien, an immigrant. It could subject them to deportation in certain instances, even a deferred prosecution, right? You take something where you think it's not on your record, right? Well, it may be that the consulate will look at stuff like that, little misdemeanors, or let's say you're smoking dope with your friends and the cops caught you and you got a minor in possession, 18 years ago or 10 years ago, or you got, you were in possession of marijuana, 5 years ago, early in college or something, and maybe they'll look at that and they'll just say, well, fuck it, it doesn't really matter. But that's yet to be seen. We don't really know the answer to that. Because it's, well, at least I don't know the answer to that yet. Now, here's the thing. How this relates, this new policy ties right into the thing about degrees and verification of degrees and how they do that. Now, and another, okay, so what is, I guess the question many of you will be asking, well, what does this mean for the cash, what's the cash value of this? If I got a minor in possession, my buddies and I were out rolling a joint and smoking a little weed, 6 or 7 years ago, is that going to keep me from being able to teach in China, etc.? And let's say you said, well, my degree, actually, I only have a community college degree. Now I'm really screwed, you're thinking. Well, actually, you're not. Okay, you're not. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay, first of all, let's look at a few undisputable, undeniable facts. All right, one of the first of those facts is this. Even at schools like Webb International English and Meton and some of these big schools, you will find teachers in the smaller cities that are they're not small cities. They're just not the big ones like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai. Okay, the big ones, right? Even in smaller cities like you take Foshan, you take Dongguan, they're not small. They'll have like 5 million in them. Um, and Foshan is near Guangdong. Dongguan is near Shenzhen. It's almost like part of Shenzhen. Huizhou is another. There's a very popular YouTube channel about Lao Wai or something. It's he's out of Huizhou. Well, for example, Huizhou, there are a couple Metin schools there. And I do know that people go to some of these different schools out there, and they'll be, I don't think that they have a degree. Actually, I know some people that have gone to these schools, and they don't fully have a degree. And so, you keep in mind, and I know some other big schools out there that, I've talked to people and they've said, well, hey, if, the guy you're talking to me about, if he doesn't meet these requirements and all that, maybe you can go out to Dongguan, maybe you can go out to some of these smaller cities, Jiangmen, Zhanjiang, some of the smaller areas where the requirements aren't so strict, okay? The requirements tend to be less strict in those areas. Now, the salary can go down by about 3,000. You might be looking at 16,000 to start at some of these places in Shenzhen, but then you go to a smaller city, and I say smaller. Again, it doesn't mean it's small. It still might have 3 million fucking people. Excuse my French. That's the way it... God damn it, mosquitoes in here. Keep me up at night. So it doesn't... You could go out to one of those cities, okay? Maybe you need to think about some of those cities. You need to consider that. And, if you are going to do that because of reasons of the degree, or because of reasons of, maybe you got a minor in possession, or you were out, like I say, you got in a, reckless driving or some bullshit like that, or something, and you don't want to roll the dice with the consulate. Okay, you don't want to roll the dice and say, well, let's find out. But by the time you find out that they think these misdemeanors... Now, if you have a felony, you might as well forget it. You should directly just, try to come over here and see if you get stopped. And you may be that you come over here and nothing happens at all. After all, there was some crazy British guy. He had been zooming around China, teaching in China for like 7 or 8 years. And this might be part of why this is happening. Okay? There was a British guy who, a couple of years ago or something, apparently he had the equivalent of, in the United Kingdom, the equivalent of felony convictions for child-related sex offenses. This guy from England, and he came over on a passport and was running around teaching here for the better part of 7 years, and no one fucking knew. Okay, no one knew until he got caught doing it again to some kids. And I'm laughing. It's not a laughing matter, but what is funny is how this fucking happened, okay? It was in the news, and it was like, whoa, holy shit. Some pedophile guy, he was caught here in the act, and he had done it in his home country of Great Britain, and he had been convicted over there. Now, I'm not saying it's just British nationals who have gotten away with this. I think there was an American guy, the same thing had occurred. And in America, I believe he had a felony. And somehow he got a passport. I don't know if that happened with an American guy or not. I really don't know. But at any rate, so if you are one of those people, back to my original point, if you're one of those people, you have some felony or something, I'm not advocating anything. I'm not saying how to do it. I'm not saying what to do. I'm just talking about issues. I'm just discussing. It's free speech. I have free speech to discuss. Okay, I don't know what would happen or anything like that. I'm just trying to look at these issues and analyze them from different points. That's free speech. Okay, that's what we have. And I'm not recommending, I'm not advising or counseling anything. Fine. Okay. But at any rate, maybe one of the reasons they're creating this law is because, you've got guys like that British guy, he came here, I mean, convicted of serious crimes and was getting away with living here and working here for over 7 years, even with kids, and no one stopped and no one did anything. Okay, well, whatever. So now, if you're not going to come over here either because of one, the degree thing, two, the criminal background check, or three, you're kind of like, well, you could be that, well, I want to first come over and see what's going on, and I want to even see these schools, and I want to get to know where it is I'm going to be living or working, and I want to actually see the classrooms. I want to see the kids. I want to see that there's tables and desks and chairs and computers and the ability to pay my salary, okay, before I get into some visa process over here and then come over to a school in a country that I know nothing about, okay, for the first time, and then just roll the dice, because I think that's also rolling the dice. It's just willy-nilly jump on a plane, come over here half-cocked, assuming you know this school, assuming, and relying on the fact that the school and who you have a contract with, your new employer, is that reliable. I don't think that's a very wise thing either. So if for one of those reasons you're like, well, I just don't know, maybe the best thing to do is to just get yourself a visa, any kind of visa. It could be a business visa, tourist visa, and those things are about essentially the same thing, right? Okay, it just means you get a visa, you come here, and you find a school, okay, that you're interested in working for. It may even be a good school, one of the ones you thought, hey, maybe I would have applied for this beforehand, and you come over here and find a school, and then you go, okay, do I need to have a work visa? I mean, what's going to happen? You can ask yourself, you can ask them, is it going to be required of me? And are you going to require it? And you can even say to them, they may say, well, yes, we want you to have that. And you can say, well, I'm here already. I don't want to do that, or I'm not going to do that. Do you still want me? And I think you'll find when you push it, okay, they'll say, yeah, okay. All right. They'll say, yes, okay. All right. But we can't get you a work visa. All right. You say, okay. All right. And so that is certainly one option that people can consider or do consider. Now, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about smaller cities in another video, because it relates to a couple other considerations and why you might want to choose a school in those areas. Whether you're going to do a work visa or not, I mean, that's fine. You do a work visa, great. Okay. But there are reasons to go to those smaller cities regardless. Okay. All right.